Let's get an updated forecast from longtime First Coast meteorologist Rautenkranz. Lauren, good morning. It seems like Jacksonville dodged a bullet, but not so much our friends to the west and the south.
Hey there, good morning. And I got to say, I would say most Floridians kind of slept with one eye open last night.
Yeah, no doubt. A harrowing night for some people on the West Coast. What are things looking like here locally, Lauren?
Yeah, so obviously Milton Center is now offshore, right? But our hazards are going to actually remain today. I would say Duval really, just escaped the worst of it. But we are going to focus again, like we mentioned yesterday, and folks that you've been hearing from local officials, St. John's, Putnam, and Flagler counties, right? So the flooding is going to be something that we're going to watch along with those high winds that are going to be felt throughout the day today. So flooding is going to continue around times of high tide. That St. John's River is backed up and its tributaries as well. And we could see the water high for weeks, really. The water's going to continue to drain from the south, where we had lots of rain in St. Petersburg, for example, 18 inches.
Wow.
Across central Florida and Orlando, we had very heavy rainfall with that northern eye wall. And on top of that, we're headed toward our highest astronomical tide of the year next week, that full moon, which is in the perigee phase, the closest supermoon of the year. Our hunter's moon is October 17th. So something that we're going to watch. And specifically in St. Johns County, we want to mention, or at least I've been in touch with our pals at the National Weather Service in Jacksonville, worked with them for many years, and they say Hastings area, Flagler Estates in southern St. Johns County, where Deep Creek is actually cresting near record levels that were established back in Irma. So we haven't seen these water levels in portions of our St. Johns River and the tributaries for many years.
It does sound like they're having some severe flooding impacts there, and that those might continue. And we're going to be touching base with the county administrator of St. Johns County in just a little while. Um, First of all, what questions do you think you would have for her? And also, if you can kind of give me an update on the wind situation, because I know that some of those winds are actually going to get worse through the morning.
Correct. We're going to have some pretty gusty winds, and most of those, the strongest wind gusts are going to be confined to the coastal areas. So inland locations, mainly west of the St. Johns River, they can kind of take a bit of a sigh of relief, but really areas along the river, along those waterways, the ICW, and along the immediate coast, there are beaches, we're going to have those winds pick up today out of the north. And you think we want to have more of a south breeze, more of a westerly breeze to kind of back those waters out into the Atlantic. And so that north breeze is just going to continue keeping things a little bit more elevated. Our high tide today is really around mid-afternoon, kind of a generic speak for all of Northeast Florida along the river and the coast there. So I would say, debris and or trees or power lines or flooded roadways that we saw overnight, it's going to be a hazard that we're going to see. Generally speaking, for areas that are pretty much, northwest of Duval County, let's say, those north breezes are bringing in some cooler, drier air, and we have sun this weekend. So it's really a totally different story for folks that are, out of that coastal area.
And when you talk about the winds, are those primarily a concern for you because of their effects on the water? Or do you think that we're going to be seeing strong enough winds that they're going to continue to damage, as we've seen down in Palm Coast, for instance, the roofs of homes, or possibly bring down trees?
Right. I would say the ground is very saturated, so it doesn't take much at this point for some of those weak-rooted trees to, kind of blow over with this continued wind. But the bigger threat is probably the water this point moving forward, and or blowing things around that are already on the ground.
In terms of people who've evacuated, we know that there's a lot of local evacuees here on the First Coast that might be wanting to get back to where they left. What is your sense of that? I know we just heard earlier on the radio that, for instance, Pinellas County is basically saying nobody can come in. They're shutting all access points because of the damage in the St. Petersburg area.
Yeah, and it's heart-wrenching, truly. I know what it's like. I've got family in St. Petersburg, and they had to pick up and leave, because in Helene, we saw the water up to doorsteps. A lot of people in homes that have never seen flooding ever in their lifetime. And so it is definitely unnerving to not know what's happened. And I understand the sentiment of wanting to get back and kind of get life back to normal. But think about this major hurricane. Florida's third landfalling hurricane so far this year. We've just got to give it a little time for local officials and emergency responders to go out and do what they're trained to do. I mean, we've got to get trees off of roadways. There could be power lines still down in portions of the state. And, if you have evacuated to Jacksonville, let's just say, and you are from a place like Tampa or St. Petersburg, I do know people like that. There's a lot of those back roads, and very, very high tree canopies out there. And we've seen a lot of winds and a lot of rain, and we just don't know what's out there just yet.
Well, Lauren Rautenkranz, great to talk to you. Thanks so much for that important update today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Anne. And can I say my sandbar report tomorrow, I probably won't be able to do it. Unfortunately, there's too much debris and junk out there. So stay safe, everyone.
Yeah, stay safe on the water and maybe avoid it altogether.
All right, Anne. Keep smiling, everybody.
Be safe, Lauren. Up next, flooding in the ancient city. We get a close-up damage assessment from the mayor of St. Augustine. Welcome back. With predictions of 8 to 10 inches of rain and a 3 to 5 foot storm surge, many were watching St. Augustine to see how it would fare. Joining me now on the phone with a check-in on conditions there is Nancy Sikes-Kline, mayor of the city of St. Augustine. Good morning, Nancy. How is everything going there?
Good morning. Everything is, we actually, were very fortunate last night that the storm passed during low tide. So we did see flooding, but not to the extreme. As we are now, as it stands now, there's still flooding in some areas, some of the very low-lying areas. Downtown, we have our traffic signals have been turned off. So there's no traffic control devices there at the foot of the bridge. The bridge is open. It is passable. The Bridge of Lions is open and passable downtown. Of course, everybody's always concerned about the downtown, right? Mm-hmm. But we have trees down. We have power lines down. There are some outages in the city. We've got as of 6 a.m., we had about 2,000 out of power, which is about 18% of the accounts in the city. And what's happening right now is we're asking folks to stay put and stay patient with us because we have another high tide coming this afternoon about 2. And we really need the roads clear so that our crews, we've got a number of types of crews. We have public utility crews going out and they're checking the lift stations to make sure they're all working in working order. They're clearing drains in preparation for the 2 p.m.-ish high tide. So we have crews doing that. And then we also have damage assessment crews out looking at, calling in where the trees are down, how the homes are doing, who got flooded and who's probably a lot of garages, at this point is what I'm thinking. In some of our usual low-lying areas.
Yeah. What are you hearing in terms of whether facilities are working? And I mean, particularly water systems. Are people able to use their showers, their toilets, and what, if anything, are you advising them?
Well, we have been asking them we've been consistently asking them to lay off on their washing and dishwashing and those to not put a strain on the system, on the wastewater system. So at this point, I don't have any updates. I'll have to be honest with you, I don't have any updates on whether anything is not functioning properly, but like I said, again, they're out checking those lift stations. You might recall after Hurricane Matthew, we got a large grant to elevate our lift stations since they were underwater. So all of our lift stations in the city have been elevated, so they should have been able to, none of them should have flooded during this event. So everything should be working, but I don't have an exact update on that for you.
And Mayor, have you heard anything in terms of injuries in, whether it's first responders or people? Have you been hearing of anything in terms of that? Do you know if first responders were having any trouble getting to people who needed help?
No, I mean, we haven't had any of those kinds of things. I mean, it's still a very serious condition. It is. I don't want to say it's just all clear, we made it, because we still, like I said, we still have this one tide to get through, and we still have the wind. So, like you just heard. So, but everybody's really being patient. We really appreciate that. Everybody's calm, and it's almost like we're seasoned. Old seasoned hands at this. It's almost as if we know what we're doing. So, maybe we do.
Yeah.
Maybe we do. One thing that I really wanted to stress, hopefully if anybody's listening in the city, I mean, I think that it's a really good idea to keep your sandbags. I know a lot of people have their flood walls up and their dam systems, and I think those need to stay in place. So we're asking everybody to we keep those in place while we go out and get this work done.
And you
the work that we need to get done.
You could have mentioned about being like a seasoned, city when it comes to these storms. Certainly you've seen your fair share. And it was interesting to see in St. Augustine, the preparations so much more advanced than they were just beyond sandbags. Like you said, there's these dams that have been put up, but people are also using foam sealant to kind of seal up their doors and windows. They're using tape to close the cracks that might, allow water in. And so the question of resilience, though, I mean, this is a city that is very much imperiled by climate change and sea level rise. It appears that some of this is just the new normal. People are getting used to dealing with this extreme flooding.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we really we have a full-time resiliency officer in the city now. We're constantly, when the king tides come, we put out press releases. We warn people so people are aware. Everybody's very conscious of water. We're very water conscious. And yes, we do recognize this, the sea level rise, climate change, all of those things are very important to us. And we're very sensitive to it. So, we are seasoned. We've had 5 of these. So, we're used to it. We've got, it's amazing what's going on. A lot of homes are getting elevated. I'm starting to see walls being built like more like knee walls being built around the perimeter of properties, and the flood dams. It's amazing what's happening. I think a lot of people are trying out different things. And of course, it's always a matter of, what kind of budget do you have? I mean, if you have the budget, elevation is the best way to go. And that's what, of course, we would recommend. But if you can't, there's a number of other steps that you can do. And people are trying this. Some of them are more temporary and some of them are more permanent. But we've moved down the road, definitely.
Yeah. Mayor, any last thoughts? We know you've got a busy day ahead of you.
Well, yes, thank you. And I think the final thought really is we really, really appreciate how everybody's handled themselves in this. It's definitely not over until, we can't give the all clear until after the high tide this afternoon. So we're just asking everybody's patience. Please do stay off the roads during that time. We don't want to see people driving through water because it can damage property. I mean, even an inch of water in somebody's house, that wake from your vehicle and that 1 inch can be all the difference in the world. So we really want people to use the live cams. There's a bunch of live cams around downtown. Get on the website and, you can go on my Facebook page and you can look and see. I've got a link up there so you can look at all the live cams and they're all working. So, don't take it on yourself to go out and drive around in this stuff. Just be patient. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Mayor. Those live cams are, a lifetime view of what's happening all around the city. So thank you for joining us this morning, Mayor Sikes-Kline. She's the mayor of St. Augustine, and be safe, please.
Thank you.
I want to move now to St. Johns County Administrator Joy Andrews. She joins us on the line. Good morning, Joy. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning.
Tell us what you're seeing. What are you hearing about current conditions? We know that St. Johns County, parts of it were very hard hit by Hurricane Milton.
Yes. So thank you. Good morning. Well, we're looking at really increasing number of power outage at this time. We started this morning 34, and it started kind of slowly creeping up because of the flooding, and the trees are kind of coming down. So we're now looking at roughly 38,000 clients power outage, and in some usual road impassable situation, and the areas such as Deep Creek. This morning, really at 7 o'clock, we were already measuring 1 inch less than Irma flooding. Some of the mailboxes already underwater around the Deep Creek area. So Flagler State, Hastings, we don't really have any reported injury, which is really great. But just like what the mayor just said, the impassable situation at Davis Shore area, Lincolnville, those areas, our rescue trucks are not able to respond any calls. So high water vehicle is the only thing we can use at this time. And overnight, Flagler County 911 actually went down. So we had to assume they're dispatching also for their emergency event from our dispatching team. So at this time, our evacuation order is still in place. We want to make sure, have the same message out there that we really don't know the condition is safe for people to go back home, and not to mention to drive in those very high water area, and that could potentially create a wake to damage other people's neighbors and houses. So that's kind of what we're looking at. As far as county infrastructure goes, we do have a main sewer pipe line was busted last night on Anastasia Island. So we are actively working on repairing that, and that's in the Mizell Road area.
We are talking about the storm impacts from Milton. We are focusing right now on St. Johns County. We're talking to St. Johns County Administrator Joy Andrews. If you have questions or comments, or if you have seen some of the worst of the storm yourself, we welcome your calls and comments. You can reach us at 904-549-2937. You can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can tag us on social media. Joy, I want to ask you about that. You just said that there has been a sewer break at Mizell Road on Anastasia Island. How significant is that? What kind of quantities of sewage are we dealing with? And does that impact whether people can use their showers, their toilets, anything that would require wastewater?
Well, so that really is our main line for the Anastasia Island area. So it is fairly significant. At this time, we have made a decision to not shut the water line down because we still have a lot of residents that did not evacuate and they're still on the island. But we really want to encourage our users on the island, limit the flushing, limit the use of really anything that can bring water into our sewer system. We're looking at probably a few days before we can repair the whole thing. So there is definitely spillage in the area, but we're trying to contain that until we can completely fix the situation. It's very difficult right now to get on, any contractors out there. So we're looking at probably a couple of days.
Wow, that's going to be a mess. I want to ask you about the 911 thing. I know you said that Flagler County lost its 911 capabilities, and so St. Johns County is absorbing some or all of that. Of those call-ins. So how has that stretched your first responder team there in St. Johns County?
Well, they are absolutely. They're very busy. But, we always have these kind of mutual aid agreements with our surrounding municipalities. So we help each other out, and they have sustained bigger damage than we have, but we're managing.
All right. Joy, I want to put you on hold just quickly because I want to take a call from John in Palm Valley. Just 1 second while I switch over here. John? Are you there, John? Oh, I guess he's not quite there. All right. I'm back to you, Joy. We are hearing this morning as much as 5 feet of water in Flagler Estates and Hastings. And for people who aren't familiar, that's like the southwestern part of the county. What have you heard from people on the ground there? Are you seeing any images? I know that you said that by Deep Creek, there's, mailboxes underwater. Is that kind of the same situation in downtown Hastings, for instance?
Downtown Hastings is just a little farther out, but downtown Hastings has historically always had drainage issues and low line. So yes, that area, I don't know quite, it's up to 5 feet. Our rapid damage assessment is starting now, and our full assessment is probably not going to be taking effect until after high tide, which is 2 p.m. So we'll have a full picture of where everything's are. And remember, if it is flooded now, it may even be more flooded later because of the high tide. So it's now receding. The water is having a hard time to find places to go. So that's why we want to keep our evacuation order in place for now, because it's not safe for many of our residents to go back home.
All right. I think we do now have John on the line. John, go ahead.
Yes, I understand the dangerousness of the flooding and such, but within the county and within the zone A and B, there's multiple different areas. So Ponte Vedra, even Palm Valley are high and dry now, and why wouldn't we lift the order for that part of town and encourage people to go on back in terms of the emergency order? Certainly doesn't look like Lincolnville around here. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I guess, Joy, the question is in terms of people being, allowed to return. That order, I mean, it was a mandatory evacuation order for those zones A, B, and F, right? F below 206. Does it seem like it was required in retrospect for the northern part of the county?
Well, our evacuation order is A and B, like you said, F south of 0206. It is a messaging challenge for us because we do have to make sure that the message is consistent for all of our residents. Some of the areas that are experiencing high water line are areas that people may not be familiar with where they are. Like just you said, if you live in the north portion of county, you don't quite know where Deep Creek is. You don't quite know or familiar enough to know where Flag Lake State is or Hastings or Davis Shore. To localize those areas to kind of lift evacuation order is very challenging. We want to make sure our residents are staying vigilant on our condition at this point, and it's gotten better, but it will get worse when the high tide's coming in. So we're seeing trees falling down now while they were still on before. So safety is really everything and paramount for the entire county. So we would ask our residents to be patient, but if they are staying informed with these type of interviews and news outlets, they know that kind of the situation condition where it is more hazardous than others. So use caution, use common sense.
Yeah, I wonder, Joy, I mean, so many of these incidents, whether it's flooding or damage, are really hyper-local when they're happening. And so you can have parts of the county that are totally unaffected. It doesn't seem like there's anything going on. And as you say, other parts very, very much imperiled. Is there ever any discussion about sort of divvying up the zones so that we're talking, maybe coastal if you're, in the St. Augustine area, but perhaps if you're closer to Ponte Vedra and the Jacksonville line, that maybe it doesn't apply?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question, and that's definitely something exploring. But right now, really, I think the safety is paramount to anything else. And then the residents who didn't evacuate know how the condition looks like. So again, kind of go back to common sense. But as far as all the team over here at the EOC, we want to make sure that everybody is safe in St. Johns County.
For sure. Well, thank you for joining us, Joy Andrews. She is the chief administrator in St. Johns County. Please take care and good luck to all of you out there.
Thank you, Ann.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the damage and recovery from Hurricane Milton. If it's safe to do so, you can give us a call and let us know what you're seeing in your neighborhood. You can reach us on air at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out on social media. I want to welcome now Jason McNamara. He is the former chief of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that's FEMA, from 2009 to 2013. He's currently the director of emergency management operations at the Center for Naval Analysis, a nonprofit security group. Good morning, Mr. McNamara. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for having me.
What will you be looking for in a recovery process like this one post Milton? And what should residents expect to see across the state?
Well, first, because my former boss, Craig Fugate, may be listening, he was the boss when I was there from 2009 until 2013. So I was his chief of staff. So just to be clear about that, so I don't get razzed by him. But I think, unfortunately, the state has extensive experience with hurricanes, and the folks who just went through Helene are going to see a similar process that they saw over the past week. Thankfully, this hurricane did not produce catastrophic levels of damage. It did produce damage, significant damage across the state, and certainly in areas of central and eastern Florida that perhaps didn't expect that level of damage. But the things that you saw happen immediately post Helene with a lot of debris removal, assessment of damage, and then individuals applying both to the state, to voluntary organizations, and to FEMA for individual assistance is what's going to happen over the next weeks and months. Also, with respect to kind of the main issue that I think you all are facing now, which is power. There was enormous amounts of pre-staged resources from outside of the state that are moving in right now to try to get that power back on as soon as possible.
One thing that we're facing obviously is this back-to-back storms, as you said, just West Coast hit twice in essentially 2 weeks. And the debris removal question is a problem when you're trying to get stuff off the street that can become windborne hazards, but maybe don't even have time to get to it before the next storm hits. So, what, if anything, can uh, FEMA officials or state and local officials do to try to perhaps better prepare for a lesser interval between these severe storms?
Well, it's really just a matter of trying to get your debris contractors in as quickly as possible and remove the debris as quickly as possible. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of companies that do that, and many of them are based in Florida for obvious reasons. But no, this was an anomaly. I mean, the last time I think I can remember back-to-back hurricanes like this was 2004 with Hurricanes Charlie and Ivan, and then I'm forgetting one, Francine maybe, where you kind of had back-to-back-to-back events. Now this back-to-back event happened to hit in almost exactly the same area, which is unfortunate. So no, it's really a matter of and you'll see it today, is how quickly can you get the resources in? How quickly can they move the debris out? In terms of, kind of the administration behind that, again, because of all your experience with hurricanes and because the companies and the local governments and the state government understand what the rules are and how to get reimbursed by the federal government, I mean, that is not a stopping point, certainly in the state of Florida. So it's really just trying to get the resources into the affected area as quickly as possible. But, it's hard to, there's not a lot of planning efforts that consider having hurricanes this quickly back to back. It certainly takes more than 1 week to clear all the debris from one storm, no matter how good you are.
Yeah. Having covered a few of these storms myself, I know that there are sometimes unrealistic expectations of FEMA, or perhaps just a fundamental misunderstanding of what FEMA does and what
Mm-hmm.
FEMA is.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have an expectation that FEMA is there to make them whole. Explain to us a little
Right.
bit more about kind of what FEMA really does and what it's supposed to be doing.
Certainly. Then thank you for that question. Yeah, there are specific laws that Congress has passed that determine how much assistance the federal government will pay post-disaster. I think the big takeaway from this for your listeners should be FEMA, certainly with respect to individuals, FEMA is there to provide emergency repairs, try to help provide money for emergency repairs, try to help you get back into your home, make it, the term of art is habitable, but it is not going to pay for all repairs, and the assistance is capped, the number changes every year, but it's in somewhere in the $20,000 to $30,000 range. So that is not going to rebuild a home if a home is destroyed by a disaster. That is the purpose of insurance. That's the purpose of flood insurance. What you've seen, I know this is not the case in Florida because there's a big push for flood insurance in Florida, but what you saw in North Carolina was that many of the folks who were impacted by those historic floods did not have flood insurance. So they really have no recourse in terms of rebuilding their home because they will not get enough money to build those. So they'll have to kind of move on and make a different decision. But it is not a complete restoration. It is a kind of a leg up, paying for critical needs in the immediate aftermath of disaster. Sometimes unfortunately, if there's a funeral expense that has to be paid, then the federal government can help with that. And as I said, kind of emergency repairs to make a home habitable. Then if there is temporary housing assistance via the use of mobile homes, if a large area has been wiped out and a number of people are without homes, FEMA will provide temporary housing assistance for up to 18 months. So you've seen that in a number of disasters in the past.
Yeah. We're going to be talking in our next segment with an expert on insurance and dig a little deeper into the question of, flood insurance, wind insurance. But I want to ask you, because you brought up what's going on in North Carolina. FEMA is really stretched thin right now. I heard a report that prior to Milton, only about 10% of its available response staff was available, that so many resources have been taken by other disasters elsewhere. Is FEMA at this point, big enough, well-funded enough to handle the current level of disaster relief that's required that we're seeing?
Well, I would say so. I've been doing this now for 30 years almost, and I will say there's been an extreme maturity in the emergency management community over those 30 years. To be honest, with respect to personnel and actually coordination personnel in a state like Florida, FEMA's role, while important, is not as critical as the professionals that you have there in the state of Florida. So in terms of the administration and coordination with local governments, ensuring the resources go in the right place, you have a highly professional organization there in Tallahassee that deals with that. And FEMA provides the money, to be perfectly honest. They provide the money to do that. So that will help the state significantly. But to your broader question, since about 2017, FEMA has become kind of a jack of all trades with respect to whatever critical incidents happen in this country. You saw their leadership in COVID. You've seen many FEMA leaders kind of take roles in other pandemics like Mpox, try to help the nation with receipt of Afghan refugees after we withdrew from Afghanistan. So it is kind of become the new normal at FEMA. Just as by way of context, I mean, for COVID, they were operational on a disaster for over a year, where they staffed an emergency operations center federally for over a year. So it has become the new normal. There isn't really a disaster season anymore. You used to be able to know when the floods were going to come and when hurricane season was going to happen, but really at any time during the year, you could have a major or close to catastrophic or potentially even a catastrophic disaster. So the short answer to your question is they all understand there that they could be called on at any time. But they certainly are, from a resource perspective, they certainly are stretched and they try to leverage what they have. So it's evolved. But, back in the 90s, there was no response organization at FEMA. They were not getting ahead of the disasters. They were not on the ground with the states before the disasters happened. And that is the norm now.
Yeah.
So I would say the system is better. we have a heck of a lot more things to deal with these days.
Just briefly, I want to ask you about the question of kind of post-disaster misinformation. I know that that was a big problem, has continued to be a big problem in North Carolina. There was rumors, for instance, that people couldn't receive more than $750 aid when that kind of is
Right.
the baseline aid that FEMA is able to provide on an emergency
Right.
basis. But what do you think FEMA can be doing to better combat misinformation?
Right. I mean, they are working hard on it now, and there has been a lot of pushback, and there are a lot of FAQs on misinformation, and it is a serious issue. This is not. Folks probably don't know this, but this was happening in Maui after the fires that they experienced about a year ago, where there was a nation state that was actively providing misinformation on those fires. So this is something that we're just going to have to deal with consistently moving forward. And I think there's a few things. Certainly, FEMA can work to combat that as much as possible, and I think they have been doing that. But a lot of this comes down to the individual and what you're reading, and you really need to consider the context of what you're looking at, and is this is this a relative that forwards everything to you, and think about what you're getting and whether or not what the source is, and then your local government. Certainly in a disaster situation, is going to have the best and most up-to-date information about what's going on in your locality. So if you need to kind of default to a source, that is the source I would default to. And then finally, if you get something that's kind of overblown or seems a bit hysterical, think twice about sharing that with other folks. That just understand that there is an enormous amount of misinformation out there. Some people who are actually seeking to cause harm, and some foreign nations that are seeking to cause harm. So in many ways, it does come down to you as an individual, kind of verifying what you're looking at and thinking about sharing that before you do that.
Well, he's Jason McNamara. He's former chief of staff at FEMA. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. McNamara. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Good luck to everybody there.
Thank you. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the damage and recovery from Hurricane Milton. If it's safe for you to do so, give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also tag us on social media or email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I want to welcome in now Matthew Carlucci Jr. We know that this can be a Byzantine and frustrating process when it comes to insurance claims. Matt, you are with the Carlucci Agency. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So some people are just now waking up to serious damage. Others will soon be returning to it. What is the first thing that they should do if they are looking for, making an insurance claim or thinking that they might have to?
Well, I think probably the best thing to do, if they have already gotten their policy information ready and handy, is file a claim and file it online. If you call, unfortunately nowadays the carriers, they really want you to go online, so there's not going to be a lot of people answering the phones. And the people that are answering the phones are on calls that probably are lasting a little bit longer than usual. So you're going to be on hold for a long time. And, once you get somebody to take your call, they're not going to ask you a lot of questions. They're just going to say, what's your policy number? What's the extent of the damage? And they're going to say, thank you very much. Here's your claim number. We'll have an adjuster contact you in, 48 hours. So it's much better to just go ahead and file it online because it takes, maybe a minute. And then honestly, kind of just do what you can to clean up your house. If there's anything you can do to prevent further damage, like if you have a leaky roof and you feel like you're able to secure that with a small tarp or something to prevent further leaking, go ahead and do it. But I do think that getting a claim filed as soon as possible is the best thing to do. And then, if you've got miscellaneous questions of just how do I handle this or that, then I would just say call or email your insurance agent and let them, speak to that.
I want to ask you about short-term repairs. I know sometimes people have this sense that they have to kind of leave everything as it is so that the insurance, the
Hmm.
claims adjuster can come and eyeball it for themselves. But it's possible, I believe, to photograph damage and sort of begin the process of whether it's even such things as removing
Absolutely.
drywall or drying out, damage.
Absolutely. Yes. That's a really good point, and I get that question a lot. Yes, you can begin doing whatever you need to do, but take photos and videos of what you're doing. And very importantly, do not completely discard any damaged material because the adjuster may want to look at that. So if you have a bunch of shingles that blew off, I would say maybe just stack them up somewhere and put them maybe in your garage or something so that the adjuster can see those when he or she gets there. But yes, absolutely, you can go ahead and start making repairs. You can call repairmen, roofers, whatever you need to do. Just do a good job taking photos, videos, and keeping receipts, because at the end of the day, those photos, receipts, and videos need to tell the story of what you did right after, you filed the claim. And that makes the adjuster's job a lot easier. And when you make the adjuster's job easier, they write checks,
Yeah.
So you want the adjuster to say, wow, thank you so much. You did me a big favor. And at that point, they have really nothing left to do other than just write you a check. And so yeah, absolutely. Do what you need to do. Just document it.
I want to ask you too, you say, file a claim as soon as possible. I mean, the reality is some of our friends on the West Coast don't have, you know, Wi-Fi, they don't have a computer. Just briefly, if you literally
Hmm.
cannot file a claim online, what's the best option?
It's okay. I mean, I've seen plenty of times when people didn't file a claim until a month after, and that's fine. It's not going to cause you any issue. You at the end of the day, if you can't get even get to your house for a week or so, then an adjuster is not going to be able to get there and do anything. So it's fine. Funnily enough, sometimes because of the way these things happen, you'll have a bunch of people file a claim right away, and of course they're at the front of the line, so their claim gets adjusted. And then there's always this lull period where all of a sudden there's really no claims coming in. And so the adjusters are kind of like, we don't have as much to do. And then all of a sudden you always have another second wave of claims come in. And honestly, those get handled just as quickly. So if you can't file it right away, don't sweat it. Just get to it when you can.
All right. Well, Matthew Carlucci Jr., thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
We're talking today about the latest local impacts from Hurricane Milton. In just a moment, I'm going to be joined by Dan Scanlan, reporter with WJCT News. But first, I just want to read an announcement from JEA. It's a press release they just sent out. They say that power outages are impacting less than 0.3% of our customers. Our peak outage impact was 13,300 customers as of 3 a.m. today, but during the overnight, crews restored power to 39,000 customers. They add, just keep in mind that due to rain and continued wind, that there may be additional power outages, but it sounds like we're in a good place when it comes to at least the Jacksonville folks and the power situation. I'm going to turn now to Dan Scanlan, reporter with WJCT News. He has been out and about today, driving around, getting his eyeballs on impacts in Jacksonville. Good morning, Dan. What are you seeing out there?
Well, what Lauren was talking about and what the others in St. Augustine were talking about, the high tide has really been pushing some of the creeks. The first thing I saw was the Pottsburg Creek boat ramp was flooded into the All-Wet Sports, went down to Julington Creek, and that's overflowing into the backyards and garages of some homes. The Hood Landing boat ramp is flooded, and then as we go along San Jose and Hendricks, some of those smaller creeks are actually pushing up into seawalls. So that's the high tide concern. It usually happens during king tides and nor'easters. We didn't have a lot of rain last night. We didn't have a lot of wind, but it's affecting those creeks. San Marco Boulevard did not flood even at high tide, but I just talked to the owner of a vape shop who had a second thought about removing his barriers and has decided to keep them in place because another high tide is coming.
And so what are you seeing, Dan? I mean, you talk about the rivers backing up and some street flooding. Are you seeing any damages to homes and businesses?
I'm only seeing some garage flooded and it coming up to the back decks and overflowing some of the docks on the creeks. I'm not seeing any house damage, but these folks along these creeks, this happens during every king tide, so they're used to it. The only other damage I'm seeing is some tree limbs down. 99.9% of the traffic signals are working between downtown and Mandarin that I've driven, and there's some debris on the road. We did, as has been said before, escape a bullet here, but apparently we still have to worry about some gusty winds as the storm's back end is out there and some next high tides.
Now, Dan, I know you've been kind of hugging the riverfront in a lot of your drive, but we've got a question from Jane on Facebook. She said she's trying to see traffic cameras near Town Center and Gate Parkway near IKEA. How did the South Side do in Milton? Helene seemed much worse to me. Do you have any sense as to how they're doing in that area, the South Side?
I live near Town Center, near Tinseltown. We had a 30-minute power outage overnight, no branches, a little bit of debris, no apparent flooding. So again, that's as close as I got. I wanted to go to where I knew, as the mayor was joking about the usual suspects, where flooding would probably occur. And the creeks did back up, but not as bad as thought.
I want to take a quick call from Ricky on the north side. Good morning, Ricky. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious of these super hurricanes coming into Florida and other parts of the country, and yet you have Rick Scott and Governor DeSantis denied that there's any climate change. And is that a fair estimation or observance of what's going on in our country now? That's my question.
Thanks, Ricky. Obviously, climate change is a big topic of conversation around these storms, especially the intensity and in some cases the frequency. There, is an organization of scientists now, Dan, that examines almost in real time whether climate change played a role in the storm's intensity. And I, even from the beginning of Helene, I think we're able to tack that to an intensification, certainly, wetter because of climate change. Where are you headed next, Dan? What's next, and what are you going to be looking for throughout the day as you drive around?
I'm going back down to Mandarin, then I'm going to cut across to Town Center. I'll tell you, this is the third time in a month and a half where I've gotten my feet wet covering storms, and it seems like, just personal experience, we're getting a lot more, and it's a lot wetter. And I'll be intrigued to see what happens in areas when the high tide hits at 3-ish this afternoon, if there's any worse tidal flooding, because all the rain in Orlando is shoving the St. Johns River up. We might get a crest of that at our high tide this afternoon.
Yeah, it does sound like they're seeing some of those impacts in St. Johns County. And I know that those high winds, as Lauren Rautenkranz was saying this morning, could really, we're not seeing the winds from the south as we'd like that would sort of shove that water out of the river into the ocean. It's almost the opposite. We're seeing winds from the north and the northeast continuing.
The places that I've looked at today from 6 o'clock this morning are the places that have been flooding a lot of late, but like I did not expect to see Pottsburg Creek overflowing its banks at that parking lot. It was, and that was only due to wind and tide and the shove up the creek from the river.
All right. Well, Dan Scanlan, he's out and about. Be safe. Try to keep those feet dry, Dan. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.